Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure on behalf of the school now to ask our guest of honour, Mr. Nick Hewer, to address the school. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you so much. Wonderful performance. Lord Lieutenant, Chairman, Governors, Mr. Mayor, Headmaster, parents, family members, boys, and after that little lot, earthlings. And if there are any aliens in the audience, well, you just have to make the best of it. What an extraordinary, wonderful performance that was from the Forbidden Planet. Now, it's a great honour for me to be here today on this stage, and I'm grateful to the Master, Mr. Williams, for inviting me here to help with the proceedings, yet also to formally recognise individual ability and standout talent. But first of all, why me? And I know there's a bit of an extravagant biography at the top, but let's just wonder, really, why? Is it because I'm a merchant tailor? I know that when the BBC rather flatteringly asked me to take part in their show, and I had absolutely no idea what they'd dredge up. They discovered, actually, that way back in the 16th century, my 12 times great-grandfather, Roger, who was actually a bit of a rotter, actually, was, at the time, a merchant tailor, and indeed so was his son, Edward. And Edward then fought for the crown. He was a royalist. He was a colonel in the cavalry down in the West Country, where my family's from. And he fought outside Bath at Lansdowne and outside Devizes at Roundway, and was eventually actually taken prisoner in the great siege at Laycock Abbey. He was given up, actually, because the owner didn't want Laycock Abbey to be destroyed. Anyway, he was dragged before Parliament and called a viper, because in those days, of course, the language was very extravagant. And they gave him a smack, and they said, "You've been a very naughty boy, and we're going to take all your possessions away from you, and you've got to promise that you won't plot anymore." And they left him with some chickens, and he had a little bit of a hard time, actually, because he had quite a lot of children, and chickens don't, really sustain a big family for very long. But when Charles II took the throne, he wrote to him. He said, "Listen, I fought for your dad. Can I have my property back?" And he said, "Yes, you can. And because you were such a good bloke, you can have a bit more." So it all ended up rather well. So I'm carrying on the tradition, not of being captured, I hasten to add, but of being a merchant tailor, a liveryman of that great company. So that's one connection. Is it because I'm on the telly for 10 long, arduous, terrible years? I've followed those candidates around day after day, night after night, reporting back to Uncle Alan, who was back in the office earning another $1 million because he didn't watch anything. So it's down to Margaret Mountford and I to report back. And a lot of people say of The Apprentice, and I'm afraid you've got 3 more years after this one, because I had lunch with him the other day and he signed another contract for 3 years. A lot of people say, but you can't actually seriously tell me that these are Britain's brightest business hopefuls, can you? And I would say not necessarily. I would say almost certainly not. But the whole point is that if the BBC, because after all, they find the candidates, we have nothing to do with it, picked out the most brilliant young people, maybe from this great school, or maybe from the Side Business School in Oxford, or Wharton Business School in the University of Pennsylvania, where Donald Trump amazingly went, but let's pass smoothly over Donald Trump. Those candidates would be so brilliant that nobody could fully really understand and grasp what it was they're up to. They'd all have a Hungarian economic theory under their arm, and nobody would watch it. It would be on at 3 in the morning on BBC 27, some long-forgotten channel, and the commissioning editor would be called into somebody's office and probably shot, because this whole thing is about numbers. So the fact that everybody in this room, should you watch on a Wednesday at 9 o'clock The Apprentice, you can all with absolute certainty say, I could do better than them. And that's what it's all about. Because if everybody can do better, you get the great viewing figures, which of course is an absolutely sine qua non in the television business. So it's a great show. All the business lessons are there, but they're submerged in a sort of soup of entertainment. But nonetheless, if you watch carefully and absorb what's going on, you will certainly learn the business lessons. And it's a program, although I've been out of it now for 2 years, thank goodness, because I couldn't bear it anymore. Not just because I couldn't bear the stupidity of some of the people, but also because I'm an old person and it's very exhausting. So I gave it up. Is it perhaps because I'm on Countdown? There's a furiously intelligent game. And it's a wonderful program. It's been on the air for 35 years. And in fact, your parents were probably sitting on your grandparents' laps all those years ago, way back in 1982, when it first aired. It was the first show on Channel 4. And I'm glad to say it's still going strong. And long may it continue to do so. And I'm under contract, so that's just absolutely fine, I can tell you. There we are. All right, so Countdown is wonderful. But I thought, wow, here I am, and it's a fine school. I've read it up. Merchant Taylors is a great school, a great institution. Founded in 1620, when actually, in about the year that Edward, my ancestor's son, the oldest one, was born actually in about then. He fought up to the time, I guess, that Charles II lost his head in 1649. It's a great school. And I began to think about my school days, and I celebrated being sent away to school 62 years ago, back in 1955. And I've got to tell you that schools were really radically different in those days. I've got to tell you, there's a little bit of a commercial coming up, but it's a light-hearted commercial, not to be taken seriously. But I wrote a light-hearted memoir recently to be published by Simon & Schuster next September. Very reasonably priced, nicely presented, perfect for Christmas. And I'd like to read you a little extract. Every Sunday morning saw an exam for the entire school in one single subject, held in the great study hall. After about 3 weeks came the Irish language examination, because my mother insisted that all her boys should go back to her native island for reasons best known to her, but that's where we pitched up anyway, at the great Jesuit college in Kildare. Irish or Gaelic has many complications, not least the long accent called the fodder, which extends a vowel, and unusual gender choices. I never really came to terms with the fact that Colleen, which is Irish for girl, is in fact masculine in gender. That foxed me for quite a long time. In fact, it still does. Nevertheless, I set to manfully with my inky Osmeroid pen, which we were all obliged to write with, and they all had to have an italic nib, and there was a standard way of writing. I set to with a will in the great study hall. The results were delivered during the following week by the prefect of studies, a Jesuit, and at that time it was a small, fiercely intelligent man with a very shiny head and blazing eyes, and he was called Skivvy Lawton. It was his function to gather all the results from all the different classes, and he would then deliver them by bursting into each classroom. He was from Skibbereen in County Cork, so he spoke quickly in the sing-song way of the Cork man. He would read out the results, starting by calling out the name of the boy who came top. Let's say it was O'Riordan. 87%, he would say. And O'Riordan would then stand up, looking very pleased with himself, march up the aisle in the classroom, go to Father Lawton, shake his hand, and receive what was known as a place card, much as I've been doing here today. These were awarded for first, second, and third places and came in white, gold, and blue, beautifully printed with Latin script, highly desirable, and something to send home with the weekly letter. Those three place card heroes having returned to their seats, Lawton, Skivvy, would then read out the rest of the results, finishing with the lowest. Now, unbeknownst to me, there was a break point at 40%, below which was a fail. And this Irish exam was the first exam of the academic year, 3 weeks into the term. I got 17%, which I thought was remarkable, bearing in mind that I was unaware that the Irish language even existed 3 weeks beforehand. So you can imagine my surprise when I was invited to step outside, at which point Skivvy dived into his floor-length, inky black soutane, which is the sort of outfit that Jesuits wear. And he produced a leather object about 15 inches long. This, I quickly understood, was a pandy bat. a spatula-shaped whalebone encased in leather, apparently manufactured in Scotland. Most of the Jesuit masters carried them, together with a checkbook. I always rather enjoyed this. A little checkbook. It was printed in Latin. Pueri nomen, of course, Latin scholars amongst you will know that that's the name of boy, poena. Punishments, you'll notice that it's plural, which worried me. Quam ob causam, description of offense, datum, date, topped by a crest and signed with a flourish. It was a painful old business 62 years ago, I can tell you, because I wasn't necessarily a very good boy, and the old pandybat, and those of you who have ever read James Joyce, because he was one of the alumni, wrote about it in Portrait of an Artist, and I think in Ulysses, actually, coming to think of it. The old saying, this is going to hurt me more than it will hurt you, never truly rang true to those on the receiving end. And I think we can all agree, that things have changed for the better, and it's great schools like this with a wonderful feeling of freedom, openness, and friendship. Those are the benefits from the old days when things were really very, very rigorous. Now, in our perennially busy lives, it's so important, I feel, to find opportunities like today to pause, reflect, and take stock in order to celebrate the various achievements, endeavors, and successes of many of you, the fruits of your collective labors, if you will. Clearly, not all of you can be prize winners coming forward today to be handed the place card of my youth, but you've all undoubtedly been provided with a raft of opportunities, and arguably you have, to an extent, been gifted a head start in life, and for that you can thank the foresight and generosity of your parents. Now just pause there for a moment, because it's tremendously generous of your parents and far-sighted to go through the deprivations that some will have gone through to send you here. And I always regret not thanking my father for sending his children away to school and for paying and, I guess, taking some hardship himself and the family to make that sacrifice. And I think, sometime in the near future, you should mention it to your parents, because, they will be grateful. It's great to be acknowledged that they're actually making a sacrifice. So important. It's also apt, I feel, to praise the industry of your teachers, who have been instrumental in stretching and challenging you all to achieve of your very best. And I'd like you, as young adults of this school, to project forward some 10 or 15 years into the future to consider potentially your own children sat here in your position today, in this very hall, I guess. What would you like your generation's legacy to be? What would you want the next generation to be striving to achieve? And what is your personal hallmark here at Merchant Taylors? I'd hope that many of you feel proud that you've developed holistically, contributing in the broadest sense within this multifaceted environment where you will, I've no doubt, have exceeded expectations. But in shaping you as a collective body, I imagine you will now have excellent values instilled in you via your talented staff and benevolent pastoral carers. The chief tenets of trust, respect, fairness, and forgiveness, for example, could be an effective paradigm for life. In addition to upholding such core values yourselves, I hope that you feel enabled to impart similar life lessons to others as you leave this caring community in future months. You have learned shared lessons in the broadest sense vis-a-vis teamwork and resilience, equipping you to support others effectively and to rally when times are tough. Now, given my more recent tenure as host of Countdown, you may perhaps assume that I'm a wordsmith. I am a little bit, but the lexicography I should surely leave to my able-aged Susie Dent, the wonderful etymologist. Yet I've compiled the shortest of acronyms or mnemonics to take with you, and that is STRIVE. STRIVE. S is for support. Support each other, in particular those less able around you. T is for take up, and indeed embrace the opportunities made available to you. Sometimes, we cruise through school a bit, and we don't actually recognize what an opportunity is. We go for the easy way. And I guess actually I was a bit guilty of that. I was in the first rugby team, which was a big deal at my school. It was a big rugby school. And I played inside centre. But I never really tried. I was pretty fast for the first 80 metres. And then, just as the cup teams came up, where we played all the other schools in the province, I was dropped. My absolute anguish and horror. I never really quite understood why, until some years later I picked up the school annual and the rugby notes were there, and it said, Hewer was replaced for lack of penetrative thrust, which I thought was a bit much. If I'd known that I lacked penetrative thrust, if somebody said to you, by the way, you really do lack penetrative thrust, I would have gone and got some. And that's what it means about taking up opportunities. Try all the time. R is for risk. Be prepared to take risk and embrace failure. I for initiate and take control of situations. Be a leader, not a follower. Don't hang back, waiting for somebody else to take the initiative to take the lead. Vi is for vie, to be the very best at something, whatever your chosen field. And E for enterprise. Be different, challenge the status quo, and make a difference. Think about that. Strive. Push yourselves, guys. Push yourselves all the time, all the time. Beyond this, I hope that great schools such as this teach the future generations to really think, to avoid rote learning, of course, and to probe more deeply, to ask searching questions, and to explore the unexplained. Don't just trot it out as though you're learning your Latin. Nouns and verbs. But actually think about it. It's worth noting that Charles Darwin, an alumnus of Shrewsbury, only spent 4 years traveling, and the rest of the time he was thinking. Furthermore, that most celebrated, cerebral character, Albert Einstein, always claimed that imagination is more important than knowledge. Indeed, there are in fact 4 chief modes of human consciousness: thought, intuition, emotion, and sensation, and use these inherent and God-given faculties to guide you along whatever path it is that you choose to go down. And I, of course, wish you luck in that future journey. Let's just have a look at that strive again. Rather proud of this strive. S is for support, each other, and in particular, those less able around you. And if you sort of project yourself forward, these things are still very valuable as you go into adult life, go into business. I've always argued that, if you end up owning your own enterprise, running your own enterprise, you have a huge responsibility for those that you employ. If times are hard, and times can be very hard, we're in a period of austerity now, before you start laying people off because the business is slowing down, we don't know what to do, we must get rid of some people, think about your situation as the boss. Maybe you should cut your salary before you let somebody go. Perhaps you should not have a little skiing holiday after Christmas before letting somebody else go. You should always look after your people before you look after yourself. T for take up. Embrace the opportunities. And actually, I've never seen such a school with so many tall boys. Quite extraordinary. This should be a rugby playing school, maybe it is. T for take up. R for risk. Be prepared to take risk and embrace failure and learn from that. Initiate. Be the leader. Get in there. Be brave. Take some chances. Vie to be the very best at something, whatever your chosen field. And E for enterprise, be different. Be different. Think outside the box and all those ghastly cliches, but actually be fresh in your thinking. And you'll do brilliantly, I'm sure you will. And good luck to you all.